He understood why Maomao had refrained from explaining the motive. Liu Hemen, the man who had raised Maomao, detested baseless assumptions. He had instilled in her the belief that one should not speak too lightly or based on guesswork alone. Perhaps this was because those in vulnerable positions could so easily be brought to disaster by a few stray words. Very well. As Maomao won't say what she means, shall I be the one to give the explanation? Lahan asked. Once Maomao had confirmed that the killer was a woman, he had a pretty good idea of where she was going. No, I can do it, said Maomao. Well now, Lahan wondered what it could mean for her to say that. In the past, she would have gladly let someone else take the lead instead of having to talk herself. I see there's been some change in you, Maomao, but you should hold off. It would be better if I did the talking. Could you explain it to us, all right? I would like to confirm a few things, though. Like what? What kind of woman the killer is? What do you mean, what kind? Lahan thought back on the crowd of onlookers, recalling the women who had been there. There were 3 of them, but I don't actually know which one did the crime. 3 of them, Maomao echoed, looking up at the rafters. You know, don't you, Lahan, that it would be impossible for a woman to make it look as if a big, strong soldier had hanged himself? I suppose. You are suggesting that it would have been impossible for a woman to commit the crime. The victim probably weighed at least twice what his supposed killer did. Then how do you make the impossible possible? Consider the motive and the answer reveals itself. If one woman couldn't do it, what do you need? If one woman couldn't? Ah, I see what you mean. Lahan clapped his hands as the realization hit. It was simplicity itself. Maomao didn't say another word but only turned around. Perhaps it was because of the steady stare her boss Dr. Liu had fixed on her. He had to keep an eye on Maomao and also try to restrain Tianyu's interest in the corpse. With subordinates like that, it couldn't be easy being him. Lakan was reclining on the couch, nibbling on the snack Maomao had thrown to him. It would be time for his midday nap soon. Lahan looked at him with a moderately conflicted expression on his face. Sir Onsu, he said to Lakan's aide. Would you call the 3 women who were in that crowd earlier? Right away, thank you. Judging from the position of the sun, they just had time until noon. Lahan half closed his eyes, his heart growing heavy. Chapter 4 Lahan and the Dangling Corpse Part 3 The 3 women Onsu brought were all new palace ladies who had just passed the examinations this year. They were of reasonably respectable backgrounds. 2 of them were officials' daughters, while the other came from a merchant family. Lahan thought each of them was notably beautiful. He had also taken the liberty of summoning officials from the Board of Justice. They did not get along so well with Lahan's Ministry of War, but there was no reason to go looking for a fight. Lahan wanted someone there to witness the entire affair. May I ask why we have been called here? Palace Lady No. 1's eyebrows dropped by 3 millimeters. The brief report he had gotten about her said that she was the daughter of a rural official and that she was staying with relatives in the capital. She had lustrous black hair. I can't believe you would bring us to the very room where something so awful took place. Surely you are not going to tell us to clean up the corpse, Palace Lady No. 2 said, quaking. She was the merchant's daughter, raised in the capital, and also had lovely black hair. I want to go home, said Palace Lady No. 3, shivering violently. She was the youngest daughter of a civil official, and like her sisters she was a raven-haired beauty. Each of their faces was quite distinct, but from behind they would all look very similar. This would make it hard to tell who was who, even if we had witnesses from the projected time of death. Onsu crossed his arms. Dr. Liu and the other medical personnel had remained in the room. So which of these women is the criminal? Onsu looked to Lakan, but he was asleep. Even if he'd been awake to point out the killer, it would never stick without a clearly defined motive and manner of killing. Lahan would have found it unbearably unbeautiful to try to squeeze some forced evidence out of the situation. I see you appear somewhat distraught over being brought here as suspects, ladies, Lahan said. As he was speaking to beautiful women, he wished to be as polite as he could. At the same time, he hoped, indeed wished, that they would turn out to be as beautiful on the inside as they were on the outside. Of course we are. This is a suicide, isn't it? Why in the world would you say we killed him? Asked Palace Lady No. 1. Me a killer? Of such a great bear of a man? Asked Palace Lady No. 2. When did he die anyway? If it happened yesterday I can prove to you that I was at my house, proposed Palace Lady No. 3. Completely understandable perspectives, all of you, Lahan said. He looked at the 3 ladies, his smile never faltering. However, there are several distinct problems with the suicide hypothesis. These include the situation of the room and the injuries found on the corpse. Further, I think you all should know that alibis provided by your family or friends will not be considered compelling evidence. The three women frowned at that. More importantly, did all three of you not have a motive to kill this man? He pointed at Wang Fang's corpse, which now lay under a sheet. This man was as greedy as he was ambitious. I'm given to understand that he never saw a woman who caught his fancy without trying to talk his way into her bed. Quite a few officials saw Wang Fang speaking to all three of you. True, he spoke to me, all right, and not just a couple of times. Palace Lady No. 2 said this with a sigh. She continued, but he's hardly the only man to have made advances on me. Embarrassing though it may be to say so, surely you understand that many of the palace ladies are here seeking good marriage prospects. Lady No. 2 was the merchant's daughter, and she had the force of personality to match, a type Lahan hardly disliked. I do indeed, he said. Still, choosing an absent superior's office for a tryst is, let us say, in poor taste. All three women blushed, and that said it all. Whatever are you talking about? One of them asked. I have a family member with a nose as sensitive as a cat's. She discovered a very particular scent on the couch that the owner of this office so loves. Lahan hadn't been able to tell himself, but apparently those with better senses of smell knew right away. Maomao, having grown up in a brothel, was particularly sensitive to it. The couch where Lakan was now sleeping had been used during Wang Fang's assignations. It must have been a pleasant place. Lakan was very particular about his couches. Only a minimum of cleaning was done in this office during its owner's absence. Yet the area around the couch was unaccountably cleaner than anywhere else. You may have thought you had tidied it up so as not to leave any evidence. But since we have someone here with an animal's nose, we knew right away. Maomao was glowering at him. Beside her, Tianyu said, shoot, and I sat on that. As for Lakan, currently snoozing on the guilty couch, he showed no sign of waking up. Suppose this room was that man's little love nest. That hardly means we were the ones he was here with, Palace Lady No. 1 said, her voice trembling. Much as I might like to agree with you, I can't, said Onsu, stepping forward. This is Master Lakan's personal office. No lady in the entire court dared approach it before he left for the western capital. They knew Master Lakan too well. Lakan was unpredictable. You never knew what he would do next. So other officials resolutely kept their distance from him, and even the court ladies made it a point not to get too close. It was the same as nobody willingly walking into a warehouse full of gunpowder. Many had once made light of Lakan, seeing as he was the oldest son of a famed household yet was branded a failure. The criticism rolled right off Lakan's back, though. As long as he could play his board games, he was happy. Once Lakan saw that he needed privilege and power, however, he took everyone he viewed as an impediment and tore them up by the roots. Now there was an unwritten rule when it came to the army's fox: leave him alone. Don't even go near him. However, Master Lakan has been away for the past year. It was because you are all new here that none of you thought anything of using this room to meet a man. Onsu was right. All three of these women had become court ladies within the past year, and they did not know Lakan. Even if they had picked up on the unwritten imperative to steer clear of him, it must not have meant much to them. Otherwise they would never have joined the gawking crowd in his office. And there had been no other new court ladies in the last year except for these three. So your opinion is that one of us killed him because of a little jealousy? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but how would I or any of us ladies with our skinny arms have killed this man and somehow made it look like a suicide? Palace Lady No. 2 said. Nose, 1 and 3 immediately nodded their support. I'm glad you asked that. I'd like to consider that very question right now. Lahan beckoned Maomao over. She gave him the world's most disgusted look, so he was obliged to go to her instead. Could you give me some help? He asked. I am here strictly as an assistant to the medical personnel. What help would you have me give you? Maomao replied as if reading from a script. Since she brought up a woman's skinny arms, I thought this might be most credible if you did it. Surely not, Master Lahan. I'm certain your own arms, so pale that they appear never to have seen the sun and so willowy that they don't look like they could hold anything heavier than a brush, would provide an ample demonstration. Maomao and Lahan set to glaring at each other. Or help the guy out, Yang. If you don't help him, this will never be over. Just do it already. Maomao shot Tianyu a dirty look, but she couldn't refuse an instruction from Dr. Liu. She clicked her tongue. Very well. Toss the rope around the ceiling beam if you would. Like you did earlier. Maomao had dropped the pretense of politeness. She answered quietly enough that those around wouldn't hear. Here, rope. Yep. Maomao tossed the rope around the beam so it dangled down, then knotted it. At the end she made a noose. You think that rope is enough to hold such a big man? Palace Lady number 2 said with a sigh. Yes, but it would be difficult to dangle him with that alone. I have another rope here. Lahan passed a second rope to Maomao, who looped it around the rafter like she had the first one. This one, however, she didn't not but allowed it to hang freely. Lahan began to explain. You make a loop in the end of this rope as well, then place it around the neck of the person you wish to. Maomao, don't put that around my honoured father's neck. Maomao had been making to place the rope around the sleeping Lahan's neck. If she hated her father, there was nothing Lahan could do about that, but he didn't want this to turn into another murder right while he was standing there. Nying, we've got the perfect thing right here. Tianyu looked like he was about to pull the sheet right off the body, but thankfully Dr. Liu stopped him with another rap on the head. Lahan was becoming very grateful indeed for Dr. Liu's presence. Onsu brought a sandbag. Here, use this. The tied-off part of the rope looked like a neck, the perfect place to put their rope. The ceiling beams were just logs, used as they were. This meant they acted like a pulley, making it easy to heave the rope up. Except it's not moving at all, is it? Palace Lady number 2 laughed. Lahan's adopted younger sister Maomao was not very strong. The sandbag, measured to be as heavy as the murder victim, was at least twice her weight. With a movable pulley, the load would have lightened proportional to the number of pulleys involved. Even Maomao might have been able to lift the sandbag then, but the beam secured in place only acted like a fixed pulley. This didn't change the weight of the object being lifted. Maomao strained, clutching the rope close, but instead of lifting the sandbag, she was the one who started to float off the ground. You're right, it's not budging. Well, let me help, Lahan said. He joined Maomao at the rope, pulling as hard as he could and leaning his body weight back. I can't do this and you know it, Maomao grunted. Shut up and pull, Lahan replied. You're not even helping. It's not moving. Shut up, I said. As they sniped back and forth, the sandbag slowly began to rise into the air. Huff, puff, puff, huff. After keeping it dangling for some 10 or 15 seconds, the two of them ran out of strength, and the sandbag fell back to the floor with a thud. Maomao and Lahan followed it, panting. Lahan was not a fan of physical labour, but his demonstration would be the most persuasive of anyone here. The bee body had scratches on the neck, indicating that the victim clawed at the rope, Lahan said, catching his breath. These wouldn't be present if he had jumped from the chair and been strangled in an instant. The faces of the 3 women stiffened at that. One of you couldn't have managed alone, true enough. But 2 together, that would be possible, wouldn't it? Lahan had said something about a white ghost stone, but not which one, meaning maybe it was more than one. Listen to the 2 of you gasp for breath. Palace Lady number 2 said perhaps 2 people could have killed him, but it doesn't look like they could have hung him up. She looked strained as she spoke. Indeed, another lady said, 2 people could only just barely lift him, so it would be difficult for them to stage the hanging. That would require a 3rd person. The lady's expressions grew tenser. Lahan somehow managed to calm Maomao down and get her to help him heft the sandbag again. When they had it up to about the level of the noose they'd prepared earlier, Onsu got up on the chair and placed the other loop around the sandbag's neck. Then they cut the second rope with which they had hung up the bag, and it dangled neatly from the rafters. Behold, Lahan said, you'll note that I never once said there was only one killer. The 3 of you all did it together. With that, the 3 ladies broke down, weeping and kicking the floor in their frustration. After a great deal of kicking and screaming, whatever had possessed the 3 women seemed to release them, and they quietly admitted their guilt. They'd become friends because they had all joined the court ranks this year. None of them got along very well with the more experienced court ladies, which had only made their sense of solidarity stronger. It was so strong that they even used the same hair product, which might explain why all 3 of them had such lustrous black tresses. Each woman had been sent to the palace with instructions from their families to find a good marriage prospect, and each woman had found Wang Fang. He approached each of the ladies separately, and you can imagine what happened next. Wang Fang believed he was juggling them quite capably, but a woman's intuition is not to be taken lightly. Soon the 3-timer was found out. They say that when adultery is discovered, a woman's hatred turns on the other woman. But in this case, the 3 women were already friends, and so their anger focused on Wang Fang. So the trio conspired to kill him. Knowing that Lahan would soon be home, they invited Wang Fang to their office the day before the strategist was to return. Once one of them was lying on the couch, the usual procedure during their trysts, and Wang Fang's back was turned, the other 2 women jumped out of hiding and threw the ropes around his neck. Women are indeed terrifying, Lahan said with a great sigh. If only Wang Fang had played the situation better. Perhaps if he had found some more mature women who could have been more pragmatic about their games. The only ones left in the office were Lahan, Onsu and Lakan, who was still snoozing. The folks from the medical office had gone back to work, and the ladies had been led away by officials from the Board of Justice. The corpse was still there in a corner of the office, so Lahan had young Junji busy himself with cleaning the adjacent room. I can't believe Wang Fang was murdered because of a bit of jealousy. I thought for sure there must be some other reason, said Onsu, sighing as he prepared a change of clothes for Lakan. The outfit was neatly ironed. No doubt he wanted to get his boss to put on fresh clothes before he met the emperor. It might not have been just a bit of jealousy. Lahan looked long and hard at the three ladies' service records. In his mind he began to see a number that united their histories. You think there might have been something else at work? I would be very disturbed if there were, so I'm going to look into it. Even as he spoke, Lahan felt a pang of regret. There went the rest of his day. But then, he'd expected that something like this might happen. He would just have to carry on. Chapter 5 Jinshi and the report. The thick rug in which Jinshi's knees were currently buried was stitched with a dragon. The pillars to either side of him were carved with images of the same dragon. The rug was flanked by high officials, all of them looking at Jinshi and the other returnees from the western capital. Jinshi was bowing his head humbly. Raise your head. Jinshi did so and saw something he had not seen in quite a while, the emperor seated on his throne. You must be tired from such a long journey. Are you in good health? The emperor asked. I thank you for your kind concern, Jinshi replied. He should have presented himself to His Majesty immediately upon returning from the western capital. However, the emperor had intervened to put the meeting off until the next day, that is, now. The exact timing of the meeting, afternoon, was not a reward for a job well done. Instead, it seemed an act of consideration toward another who was there to make a report. Lakan was diagonally behind Jinshi and looking sleepy. No one but he could be so unrefined as to yawn during an imperial audience. Zuijutsu, have you lost weight? The emperor asked. He was the one man in the country who could use Jinshi's true name. Other people referred to Jinshi as the Moon Prince, a usage that had developed in contrast to the emperor himself. During his heirship, the emperor had been known as the Sun Prince or the Noon Prince. Not too much, Jinshi replied. He wouldn't deny it. He had lost about 5 kilograms, but there was no need to give the exact number. Jinshi was less concerned about his own weight than about the streaks of white that had appeared in the emperor's facial hair. The fact that the emperor didn't dye them or try to hide them suggested he had said not to do anything. Jinshi thought he felt a throb from the burn on his flank, which should have healed long ago. An imperial ruler had a great many jobs to do and a great many things to worry about. No doubt what Jinshi had done just before leaving for the western capital was something His Majesty worried about very much indeed. The thought that several of those new white hairs might be his fault left Jinshi with a clinging sense of guilt, but he still didn't regret it. Beside the emperor stood his most important advisors. It was going on 10 years since the emperor's accession, and there had been much change among them. Where Shishu had once been, Gyukyuan now stood. Jinshi focused and began his report. Kazuijutsu humbly presents himself to the imperial presence, he said. The emperor was the only one who could call him by his real name, so he was also the only one with whom Jinshi could use his real name. Jinshi had already submitted a written report to His Majesty. Now he went over only the broad strokes of his year in Ise province. He stole the occasional glance at Gyukyuan. The man's expression never changed, though he must have felt something about the death of his son. You have labored mightily, I see. It was the emperor's voice, calm and quiet as Jinshi had always known it. Before, when he had made reports, Jinshi had often been summoned by His Majesty in the evening. They would drink wine, enjoy some snacks, and Jinshi could go into much greater detail about what had happened. He wondered if such an invitation would come tonight as well. His plan this afternoon was to give the briefest of accounts, then make his exit before Lakan did anything. Despite everything that had happened over the last year, it could be summarized in a few quick lines. That would be all, and then they could leave. Ah yes, Zuijutsu, that reminds me, the emperor said when Jinshi finished his report. Perhaps you would visit the rear palace with me. It has been so long. That was quite an invitation. A buzz broke out among the courtiers. Everyone knew that under the name Jinshi, the Moon Prince had once served in the rear palace himself, but there was a general understanding that it wasn't spoken of publicly. Jinshi felt as if the emperor were playing a prank on him. The most appropriate thing for Jinshi to say at this moment was probably, surely you jest, Your Majesty. but having posed as a eunuch for 7 years, he found it hard to answer. I'm only joking, the emperor said. You must still be tired. You should spend the remainder of this day resting as well as you can. Jinchi was relieved, but also reminded that the emperor was still someone around whom he couldn't let down his guard. A few other people made reports after that, and then the audience was over. Lacan had managed not to fall asleep during the proceedings. He sprang up and raced out of the throne room the moment the end of the audience was announced. Jinchi walked into the hallway, breathing a sigh of relief. Basin and several bodyguards followed him. Baryu had been present at the audience as well. He was nearly passing out from being surrounded by so many people, so Jinchi had sent him straight back to his room. I'm to rest, am I? Now that he had properly greeted the emperor, Jinchi would have to also pay his respects to his mother, the Empress Dowager, as well as the heir apparent and Empress Jayukayu.